Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Very delighted to be talking to Paul Zacharia today about Malayalam literature. Paul, as all of you know, and if you don't, is one of the most widely read writers in Malayalam and a very highly regarded author. And Paul has a very droll sense of wit, which I think kind of goes wonderfully with the Malayalam language itself. And so what we wanted to do was have like a free-flowing conversation about Malayalam literature itself. So I'd like to start off by asking Paul, what is the nature of Malayalam literature?
And so actually, I think we can look at it in two, three, four ways. There are several things that come to mind because I've been living in that literature, living in that state, living with those people for the last half century or more. Perhaps the most important thing that I should say is that it's a very political literature. I'm sure, I don't know whether it is exceptional to Malayalam and Kerala. Maybe there are other states and other languages where literature and life is very political. But I have always felt that, even at the very beginnings of modernity in Malayalam, the political nature of the narrative and the approach of the writer to the themes was very strong. It was always there. So it's a kind of, like, I would go back to a person like Narayana Guru, whom I would say a philosopher, an ascetic, but a revolutionary thinker. And he was not a religious person in that sense. He was a rebel. So he was a social transformer and who stood up for the Dalits. And starting from him, and he was himself an excellent poet and writer and speaker. So starting from him, I would say, politics entered into the writing's mainstream. And I will also mention one more example, that is, I am talking about the 30s and 40s, when a new generation of writers of what we can call modern writing was, or modernity was entering Kerala. There was a great scholar called Kesari Balakrishna Pilla. So Kesari was a scholar he was familiar with many world languages and literature. So he called the younger writers who were emerging then, who are now legendary people like Vaikam Muhammad Bashir, Thagari Shivashankara Pilla, P. Keshav Dev and others who were young guys then. He called them and said, look, you are writing about the sky and the moon and the stars and all. It doesn't take you anywhere. Think about the poor people. And he pointed out to these people, writers like the French writers like Victor Hugo and others, and Balzac and all the rest of it, and the Russians, for example. He said, look at them and start writing about the people around you, the society around you. And he put politics into writing, if you really ask me. They are the people, Bashir and company, they are the people who guided Malayalam into a modern era, and their writing was based and rooted in the lives of the people. That is how it started. And now, Anita knows, the younger writers who are today, who are writing around me, and I am in the midst of them. In fact, it's a brilliant lot of young writers are at work in Malayalam now, novelists and poets and everything. And if they are anything, they are political. And they are secular, 100% secular, democratic, and against all kinds of despotisms and fascisms and dictatorships. Any kind of despotic, not that they are winning. We are today in an unwinnable situation, but they are at least raising their voices and saying that this is not all right, and we have to. So they are doing it, and they have problems. They are being, some of them are being, forced to return, to take back their words, etc., etc. But what I am saying is, So the primary thing I would say is the political nature, about which I am very proud.
I think so too. And as you know, though I don't write in Malayalam, as a Malayali, and when I'm in Kerala, one of the things that I notice is this great relationship that the people in Kerala have with books. I have this. I mean, I come from this really tiny village, and we have what's called a Vayanashala, which is a library. And in the library, every Sunday they have a book discussion. And that's something that you can't see in any of the metros probably. The same group of people turning up, books are being borrowed from the library there, people are talking about it, I do book events there. For the sheer reason that I think that, when I'm there and I'm talking about my work to my readers there, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And one of the other things that is very interesting about Malayalam literature is how, if you were to look at the texture of the writing, you'd see that it's very European in that sense. There's a lot of it. You catch glimpses of Malayalam, the kind of writing that you see in Malayalam literature. You see glimpses of something like that probably in French literature and Latin American literatures, Hungarian literature, and so on. So, you think there's a particular reason for this, Paul?
Yes, I think so, Anita. But yeah, actually, even now, because Malayalam has that's another point that I wanted to mention, is that the whole business of modernity in Malayalam, starting in the 40s and 50s, in fiction and in poetry, started with a wave of translations from all the world languages. Nearly every famous writer you have heard of, from Dostoevsky to Victor Hugo, to huge big volumes, like the whole of War and Peace was translated into Malayalam in 1950. I don't know, it ran into some 2 volumes of 1,000 pages each or something like that. So this kind of a massive translation effort went into the making of, and who did it? And if I don't mention the name of the agency that went into making this, it's very unfair to history. There was a writers' cooperative society in Malayalam. It was called Sahitya Pravartaka Sahakarana Sangham, the cooperative society of literary workers. That was a society a cooperative society created by writers, run by writers, and worked for the readers and the writers. It is this society that encouraged people to translate even Das Kapital, the Marx. The whole huge volume was translated in 1940s and 50s. So everything is part of the left movement also. I must mention that name also. It is part of the left revolutionary movement too. So this wave of translation, like I read all these great classics in Malayalam. I didn't know any English at that point of time. And it deeply influenced me, Dostoevsky and others. Maybe the translations were not perfect. I'm looking back, I think maybe they couldn't have been all that very good. But this material was available, and a whole generation of writers grew upon that material. Then, of course, came, and I am sure even today, when I write, shadows of all these people are in my libraries, this thing, yes, of course.
No, and I also think that probably because of this influence, this international influence of world literature in the Malayali psyche, there is a certain, when it comes to the intellectual pursuits, there is a great kind of European way of doing it, which is not like probably the Anglo-Saxon way of doing it, which is very clear and concise and so on. But this is more kind of like go with the flow a bit and that kind of thing. And the other interesting thing that's been happening now in Indian literature, of course, is how this wealth of translation, Paul's novels themselves have been translated into English, and how you see that for a long while, there were only a few writers whose works were translated into English. But increasingly, you see more and more writers' works are being translated into English. I just have one query here. Like, Do you think that's the best of Malayalam literature that is being translated?
I think so, Anita, because there are two ways of looking at it. One, ideally, when you talk about translation, you should translate only what is translatable. I think so, because some books like O.V. Vijayan's great works, actually, if you read the Malayalam original, the translations are failures. But don't you need a translation? Yes, you do need a translation. It is, and the person who reads the translation doesn't, since he or she doesn't know the original, they don't feel the difference either. So, but there are great works that have remained untranslated, basically because either they belong to another era, and they cannot, today they may not hold any relevance to people of, today's readers, etc., etc. Otherwise, today there's a flurry of translation activities around the younger writers. Like, I think some of you must have read my colleague K.R. Mira's book, I think it's called The Assassin, or the hanging. And so these are books that should have, and in fact, that's that and Benjamin's Goat Days. These are two books that should have gone across. It's actually now going across the world, as I am saying. So these are fantastic works that got translated right on time, when the translation market was opening up, and the Indo-Anglian or Indo-English readers were ready to read, because I think there may not be enough English fiction coming out in India, original English fiction, to meet the market demand. I have a feeling publishers would know better.
Well, I also think probably that, with especially see that I think there's a generation of readers who grew up. At first, there was a lot of resistance to writing in English, written by Indians. Yeah. And then that moved. And now it became like that the reader's hungry to know more. And so the writing that comes from, say, Chhattisgarh, or comes from Kerala, or comes from Andhra, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it just makes you feel that you're connected with the country that you're part of. And that somehow doesn't happen all the time in the writing that is coming from writers writing in English. Because there's still a preoccupation with, city landscapes, urban stories and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that, but do you see that kind of going, like, what was told to Tagari and Bashir and so on, that write about the everyday person? Do you think that is still happening in Malayalam literature?
In Malayalam, yes. Because the younger generation, when I talk about younger generation, I'm not talking about 18, 19, 20 or anything. Talking about the 30s to 40, 45 kind of group. Their writing is about, it's down to earth. There is no romanticism of any kind. Even lyricism has perhaps vanished, which to some extent I regret, because as you said, this is a European kind of approach to, not the British, I think. Yeah. It's more rational, more oriented to, in the old days it used to be, and in the old days it used to be called realism. It's almost like realism. So the younger generation is also absolutely down to earth on this, and people like Harish and Unni, R. Unni, S. Harish, people like that, or Vinoy Thomas, and there are several young people and there are several young women writers, brilliant writers. So these are all things that have come up automatically, and so therefore, answering your question, it is extremely down to earth in that matter. And one other point I wanted to mention here is that, I was mentioning that to you, is that, historically, actually Malayalam fiction prose is hardly 100 years old. Our first novel came out in 1901, 2, something like that. And things developed only from there. But historically, starting from there, not only the novel, the literature, the body of literature, Malayalam literature, is a kind of very interesting harmony of three communities, three cultural communities, I would call the Hindus, the Muslims, and the Christians. These three together, almost on an even level, worked. It was not deliberate work, but imagination descended upon all these communities, and enlightenment descended upon all these communities. And there was writings from, it is not even coexistence. It was a kind of harmonized totality of writing which mixed Hindu, Christian, and Muslim sensibilities, and that is the core of Malayalam literature actually. Even today, if you take a list of well-known Malayalam writers, you see a very nice, beautiful kind of equation between these communities. And it has always been secular, as I told you. The whole stream, not that there weren't madmen in all the three communities writing nonsense about hate mongers and storytellers of all kinds of poisonous stuff. They were there, they are still there. But all in all, the essential Malayalam literature has remained right from the start a very secular and democratic activity. This is what makes me very glad to be a Malayalam writer. This is
Okay, since we don't see too much of Paul in Bangalore, though he did
my
study in
Central College.
Central College.